The winter of 1943 arrived early in Amsterdam, bringing with it gray skies that seemed to press down on the narrow streets like a heavy blanket. In a modest orphanage on the edge of the Canal District, 10-year-old Emma sat by the frosted window, clutching the only possession she truly cherished, a small wooden music box her father had made before the war changed everything. The box no longer played its melody properly. Something inside had broken months ago, and now it produced only strange, irregular clicking sounds when she wound the key. Emma had arrived at the orphanage 2 years earlier, after her parents disappeared one autumn evening and never returned. The matron, Mrs. Vanderberg, was a stern but kind woman who ran the facility with limited resources during these difficult times. 23 children called this place home now, all of them touched by the war in different ways, all of them learning to find comfort in small things. If you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more compelling historical narratives. The music box had been Emma's constant companion through lonely nights and uncertain days. She would wind it up and listen to the broken mechanism click and whir, imagining it was her father's voice speaking to her in a secret code only they understood. The other children thought she was strange for treasuring something so damaged, but Emma didn't care. It was hers, and it connected her to a time when the world made sense. On a particularly cold morning in December, Emma sat in the orphanage's small common room, winding her music box as she often did. The clicking pattern seemed different today, more erratic. She wound it tighter, and the sounds became sharper, more insistent. Mrs. Vanderberg walked by and paused, tilting her head. "That's an unusual sound, Emma. Perhaps we should set it aside before it breaks completely." But Emma shook her head firmly. "It's not broken, Mrs. Vanderberg. It's just speaking differently now." The matron smiled sadly and continued with her duties. She had learned not to take away the small comforts these children clung to. The war had already taken too much from them. What neither Emma nor Mrs. Vanderberg knew was that the orphanage sat less than 300 meters from a building that had been requisitioned by occupation forces as a communications center. Inside, soldiers monitored radio frequencies, coordinating movements and maintaining contact with various units throughout the region. The work was tedious but critical, requiring constant attention to ensure clear communication channels. Sergeant Klaus Hoffmann had been stationed at the communications post for 8 months. A former engineer from Munich, he found the technical aspects of radio operation fascinating, though he missed his family terribly. He was a meticulous man who took pride in maintaining the equipment and ensuring everything functioned perfectly. That morning, however, something was interfering with the radio signals. "Do you hear that?" Hoffmann asked his colleague, Corporal Franz Decker, a local Dutch man who had been pressed into service as a translator and technical assistant. Decker leaned closer to the radio equipment, adjusting his headphones. "Yes, sir, it's some kind of interference. A clicking pattern, irregular, but persistent." Hoffmann frowned, checking the equipment connections. "This is unacceptable. We need clear frequencies. Try to isolate the source." For the next hour, the two men worked to identify the interference. It seemed to come and go, appearing on multiple frequencies in no particular pattern. Sometimes it would be strong, other times barely detectable. Hoffmann grew increasingly frustrated. "This makes no sense. It's not atmospheric interference. It's too localized. Someone must be operating an unauthorized transmitter." The concern was legitimate. During wartime, unauthorized radio transmissions could indicate resistance activity, espionage, or attempts to communicate with Allied forces. Hoffmann reported the interference to his superior, Captain Werner Schultz, who took the matter seriously. "Continue monitoring. If this is deliberate, we need to locate the source immediately." Meanwhile, at the orphanage, Emma's daily routine continued unchanged. She attended the makeshift lessons Mrs. Vanderberg organized for the children, helped with simple chores, and spent her free time with her music box. She had developed a habit of winding it at specific times, once in the morning after breakfast, once in the afternoon before rest time, and once in the evening before bed. The broken mechanism had become a kind of clock for her, marking the passage of her days. On the third day of interference, Hoffmann noticed a pattern. The clicking sounds appeared at roughly the same times each day, morning, afternoon, and evening. This regularity suggested human activity rather than random mechanical failure. "It's scheduled," he told Decker. "Someone is transmitting at specific intervals." Captain Schultz ordered a triangulation effort, using multiple listening posts to narrow down the source. The process was time-consuming and required careful coordination. Over the next 2 days, they gradually determined that the interference originated somewhere in the Canal District, in an area containing residential buildings, shops, and the orphanage. "We need to conduct inspections," Schultz decided. "Check every building in that sector. Look for radio equipment, anything that could generate these signals." The announcement sent ripples of anxiety through the neighborhood. Inspections were never pleasant, and residents feared what soldiers might discover or confiscate. At the orphanage, Mrs. Vanderberg received notification that an inspection team would arrive the following morning. That evening, she gathered the children in the common room. Her face was serious but calm. Tomorrow some soldiers will visit to inspect our building. I need everyone to be on their best behavior. Stay quiet, stay together, and don't be frightened. We have nothing to hide. Emma clutched her music box tighter. The thought of strangers going through their home made her anxious. She whispered to her friend, 7-year-old Peter, "What if they take our things?" "Mrs. Vanderburg won't let them," Peter replied with more confidence than he felt. The next morning arrived gray and cold. 3 soldiers, led by Sergeant Hoffman, arrived at the orphanage at 9 o'clock. Mrs. Vanderburg met them at the door, her posture straight and her expression carefully neutral. "Good morning. We need to inspect the premises. It's a routine check for unauthorized radio equipment." She nodded. Of course. Please come in. The children are gathered in the common room." Hoffman and his team methodically searched the building. They checked the matron's office, the kitchen, the storage rooms, and the sleeping quarters. They found nothing resembling radio equipment. The orphanage was spare and simple, containing only the basic necessities for caring for children during wartime. In the common room, the children sat quietly on benches, watching the soldiers with wide eyes. Emma held her music box in her lap, her fingers wrapped protectively around it. Hoffman noticed her and approached, kneeling down to her eye level. "What do you have there, young lady?" Emma hesitated, then held up the music box. "It's mine. My father made it." "May I see it?" Reluctantly, Emma handed it over. Hoffman examined the wooden box carefully. It was beautifully crafted, with delicate inlay work on the lid. He turned the small key, and immediately the broken mechanism inside began producing its irregular clicking sounds. Hoffman froze. The sound was unmistakable. This was the interference they had been tracking for days. He looked at Emma, then at the music box, then back at Emma. The girl's eyes were filling with tears, terrified that he would take her precious possession. "How often do you wind this?" he asked gently. 3 times a day, Emma whispered. "Morning, afternoon, and evening." Hoffman felt a wave of relief mixed with disbelief wash over him. 6 hours of investigation, multiple teams mobilized, reports filed, all because of a broken toy. He could hear Decker stifling a laugh behind him as realization dawned on the corporal as well. He handed the music box back to Emma carefully. "This is very special. Your father was a talented craftsman." "Will you take it away?" Emma asked, her voice small. Hoffman shook his head. "No, it's yours. But perhaps you could wind it a little less tightly. The sound carries farther than you might think." Emma nodded vigorously, clutching the box to her chest. "I promise." Captain Schultz was not amused when Hoffman reported their findings. "A child's toy. We've spent 3 days tracking down a child's toy." But Hoffman couldn't help feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. In a time when so much was broken and irreparable, there was something oddly hopeful about a little girl and her broken music box causing such confusion. It was a reminder that not everything was about strategy and conflict. Sometimes life was simply about a child holding on to the last gift from her father. The interference report was filed away with a technical explanation about mechanical resonance and unintentional frequency generation. The matter was closed. At the orphanage, life returned to its quiet routine, though Emma was more careful about how she wound her music box now. Mrs. Vanderburg noticed the change. "Are you being careful with your treasure?" Emma nodded. The soldier said, "The sound carries far. I didn't know it could travel so far, all the way to their radios." The matron smiled gently. "Sometimes the smallest things can have the biggest effects. That's something worth remembering." As winter deepened and Christmas approached, Mrs. Vanderburg did her best to create small moments of joy for the children. Resources were limited, but she managed to obtain a few treats and organize simple celebrations. Emma contributed by carefully winding her music box during the Christmas Eve gathering, producing its strange clicking melody as the children sang carols. Peter leaned over and whispered, "Your music box is famous now. It confused the whole army." Emma smiled, a rare expression on her usually serious face. Papa would have thought that was funny. He always said his creations had personalities of their own. "What was he like?" Peter asked. Emma rarely spoke about her parents. "He was kind and patient. He taught me how to work with wood, how to see the shape hiding inside the raw material. He said everything has a purpose, even broken things." The 2 children sat in companionable silence, listening to the off-key singing around them. In that moment, the war felt very far away, even though it surrounded them on every side. In the communications center, Hoffman continued his work with renewed perspective. Every time he adjusted a frequency or fine-tuned a receiver, he thought about the orphan girl and her music box. It reminded him of his own daughter back in Munich, who was probably Emma's age now. He hadn't seen her in over a year, and the separation gnawed at him constantly. One evening, Decker found him staring at a photograph. "Your family?" Hoffman nodded. "My daughter, Anna. She's 10 now. I wonder if she still remembers me." Children remember more than we think, Decker said quietly. They hold on to things we might consider small or broken, and those things become their anchors. The winter wore on. January brought deeper cold and harder times. Food became scarcer, fuel for heating even more precious. At the orphanage, Mrs. Vanderberg stretched every resource as far as possible, but there were nights when the children went to bed hungry and cold. Emma noticed how thin everyone was becoming, how the younger children cried more often. She made a decision. One evening, she approached Mrs. Vanderberg with her music box. "You should sell this. Maybe it could buy food for the little ones." The matron was genuinely moved. "Oh, Emma, that's incredibly generous, but I couldn't take your father's gift. He made it to be useful. Right now, food is more useful than music." Mrs. Vanderberg cupped Emma's face gently. "Your father made it to give you comfort and joy. That's useful too, especially now. We'll manage without selling your treasures." But Emma's gesture sparked something in the matron. If a child could offer to sacrifice her most precious possession, then surely the adults in the neighborhood could do more. She began organizing a quiet network of support, neighbors helping neighbors, sharing what little they had. The effort was modest, but meaningful. A baker who still had flour shared bread. A family with a vegetable seller distributed potatoes. Someone donated blankets. Slowly, the orphanage's situation improved slightly. The children were still hungry, still cold, but the edge of desperation dulled a bit. Emma continued her routine with the music box, though now she wound it more carefully, producing softer clicks that wouldn't travel as far. She had learned that her small actions could have unexpected consequences, and she carried that awareness with a new sense of responsibility. In February, Hoffman received transfer orders. He would be relocated to a different post, farther from the city. On his last day, he did something unexpected. He wrote a brief note and asked Decker to deliver it to the orphanage. "Are you sure about this?" Decker asked, reading the note. "I'm sure. Just make sure it reaches the matron." 2 days later, Mrs. Vanderberg received an envelope containing the note and a small amount of money, enough to buy food for several weeks. The note was simple: "For the girl with the music box. May she and the other children have what they need." It was unsigned. Mrs. Vanderberg never discovered who sent it, but she used the money carefully, stretching it to benefit all the children. Emma never knew about the anonymous gift either, but she noticed that meals became slightly more substantial, that Mrs. Vanderberg seemed a little less worried. Spring arrived late that year, but when it came, it brought the tentative hope that somehow they would survive. The children planted a small garden in the orphanage's tiny courtyard, coaxing vegetables from the cold earth. Emma helped dig and plant, her music box safely stored in her pocket. One warm April afternoon, as she sat by the window watching the canal, she wound her music box and listened to its broken clicking. To her ears, it sounded like her father speaking, "Keep going, keep hoping, keep holding on." Peter sat beside her. "Do you think the war will ever end?" Emma considered the question seriously. "I think everything ends eventually. Papa used to say that nothing stays broken forever. Either it gets fixed or it transforms into something new." "That's very wise." Emma smiled slightly. "I'm not wise. I just listen to what my music box tells me." The months that followed brought gradual changes. The occupation continued, but something had shifted in the air, a sense that perhaps the worst was behind them, even if difficult times still lay ahead. The orphanage persevered, day by day, meal by meal. Mrs. Vanderberg watched Emma grow a little taller, a little stronger. The girl had changed from the frightened child who arrived years ago. She had become someone who looked after the younger children, who shared her meager portions, who found ways to make others smile even when she herself struggled. "You're becoming quite the leader," the matron told her one evening. Emma shook her head. "I'm just trying to be useful, like my music box was useful that one time." "You confusing the army radios?" Emma grinned, a full, genuine grin that transformed her face. "That was pretty funny, wasn't it?" "It was remarkable," Mrs. Vanderberg said. "One little girl and her broken toy causing such confusion. It proves that even when we feel small and powerless, we can still make an impact. I think Papa would have liked knowing his music box became famous, even if it was just for being broken in an interesting way." The summer of 1944 brought new challenges and unexpected moments of grace. The garden the children had planted in spring now yielded small harvests of lettuce, carrots, and beans. Emma took special pride in tending the vegetables, often sitting beside the growing plants with her music box, winding it gently as if the clicking sounds might somehow encourage the plants to grow stronger. One particularly warm afternoon in July, a new child arrived at the orphanage. His name was Thomas, and he was only 6 years old, small for his age, with enormous dark eyes that held too much sadness. He clutched a tattered blanket and refused to speak to anyone, not even Mrs. Vanderberg, who tried her gentlest approach. "Give him time," the matron told the other children. "He's been through something difficult. We all need to be patient with him." Emma watched Thomas from across the room. She recognized that look, that withdrawal into silence. She had felt that way herself when she first arrived, when the world seemed too large and frightening to face. That evening, she approached Thomas slowly, sitting down beside him without saying a word. She simply took out her music box and began to wind it, letting the irregular clicking fill the space between them. Thomas's eyes flickered with curiosity, but he didn't speak. Emma continued winding the box, then stopped, then wound it again, creating a rhythm that was almost soothing despite its brokenness. "It doesn't work right anymore," Emma said quietly, "but I like it better this way. It's more interesting when things are a little broken. They have their own story to tell." Thomas looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. "What does it sound like when it's not broken?" "I don't remember exactly. My father made it for me before everything changed, but I think even he would agree that it's special now, in its own way." Over the following weeks, Thomas slowly emerged from his shell. Emma became his primary companion, showing him the routines of orphanage life, introducing him to the other children, teaching him how to help in the garden. The music box became a tool for connection, something Emma would wind whenever Thomas seemed particularly anxious or withdrawn. Peter noticed the change in Emma. "You're good with him, better than the rest of us." Emma shrugged. "I remember what it was like to arrive here. Everything felt impossible. Someone just needs to show him that it's possible to keep going." The bond between Emma and Thomas grew stronger as summer progressed. She taught him the names of the vegetables in the garden, showed him how to pull weeds without disturbing the roots, explained the careful rationing system Mrs. van der Berg maintained to ensure everyone received their fair share. Thomas began to smile occasionally, even laugh when one of the younger children did something silly. In August, an unexpected visitor arrived at the orphanage. A middle-aged woman named Mrs. Jansen, who lived 3 streets away, came to the door asking for Mrs. van der Berg. The 2 women spoke privately for nearly an hour before the matron called Emma into her small office. "Emma, Mrs. Jansen has come with an interesting proposition. Her husband was a clockmaker before the war, and she heard about your music box, about what happened with the radios. She'd like to see if her husband might be able to repair it." Emma's first instinct was to refuse. The music box was hers, exactly as it was, broken clicks and all. But something in Mrs. van der Berg's expression made her pause. "Your father made that box to bring you joy," the matron continued gently. "If it could be repaired, wouldn't that honor his intention? But I like it the way it is now. It's special because it's broken." Mrs. Jansen, a kind-faced woman with graying hair, leaned forward. "My husband wouldn't change what makes it special. He would just give you the choice of hearing both versions, the broken one and the repaired one. You could decide which you prefer." After much consideration, Emma agreed to let Mr. Jansen examine the music box. 3 days later, she visited their small apartment, clutching the precious wooden box nervously. Mr. Jansen was a thin man with careful hands and patient eyes. He handled the music box with reverence, turning it over, examining every detail. "Your father was a master craftsman. This inlay work is exceptional, and the mechanism, even broken, shows tremendous skill." He opened the box carefully, peering inside at the delicate gears and pins. After several minutes of silent examination, he looked up at Emma. "I can repair this. The main spring has come loose and 2 of the pins are bent, but I want you to understand something important. Once I fix it, it will play the melody your father intended. It won't make those clicking sounds anymore." Emma felt a sudden surge of panic. Those clicks had become her language with her father, her way of staying connected. Could she give that up, even to hear the proper melody? "Can you fix it so that I can choose? Sometimes the regular music, sometimes the clicking?" Mr. Jansen smiled. "You're a wise young lady. Yes, I believe I can create a small switch that would let you disengage the spring. That way, you could have both versions whenever you wished." Emma agreed to this plan. For 2 weeks, she visited Mr. Jansen's workshop every other day, watching him work on the delicate mechanism. He explained each step, showing her the tiny gears, the precisely placed pins, the clever spring mechanism that powered everything. Emma was fascinated, remembering how her father had tried to teach her about woodworking, how he had believed that understanding how things worked made them more precious, not less. "My father used to say that broken things teach us more than perfect things," Emma told Mr. Jansen during one visit. He was right. A clock that runs perfectly teaches us nothing about time, but a clock that stops, that runs slow or fast, that teaches us to pay attention, to value each moment more carefully. When the music box was finally repaired, Mr. Jansen invited Emma to wind it for the first time. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned the small key. Then she opened the lid, and the room filled with the most beautiful melody she had ever heard. It was a lullaby, gentle and sweet, with a complexity that the broken version had never hinted at. Tears streamed down Emma's face. This was what her father had created, this perfect expression of love in musical form. She let it play all the way through then closed the lid and carefully switched the mechanism to the broken setting. When she opened it again, the familiar clicking returned. "Thank you," she told Mr. Jansen. "Thank you for giving me both." Back at the orphanage, Emma's repaired music box became a source of wonder for all the children. She would play the proper melody during evening gatherings, letting the sweet lullaby ease them into sleep. But during the day, she often switched it to the broken setting, letting the clicks remind her of her journey, of the strange incident with the radios, of everything she had learned about finding purpose in unexpected places. Thomas was particularly enchanted by the music box. He would sit beside Emma and listen, his small face peaceful in a way it hadn't been when he first arrived. One evening, he whispered to Emma, "Do you think your father knew his music box would help so many people?" Emma considered this carefully. "I think he knew it would help me, but maybe that's how good things work. They start by helping one person, and then somehow they end up helping others too." September brought cooler weather and a new sense of anticipation. Rumors grew stronger about Allied forces advancing, about the possibility of liberation coming soon. At the orphanage, Mrs. Vanderburg tried to temper the children's hopes while nurturing their resilience. "We've survived this long by taking each day as it comes," she reminded them. "We'll continue doing exactly that, no matter what tomorrow brings." Emma had begun teaching Thomas how to care for the music box, showing him how to wind it gently, how to clean the wooden surface, how to operate the small switch Mr. Jansen had installed. It was important to her that someone else knew these things, that the knowledge wouldn't be lost if something happened to her. "Why are you teaching me this?" Thomas asked one afternoon. "Because precious things are meant to be shared. My father shared his skill with wood with me. Now I'm sharing this with you. But it's yours. And one day, maybe it won't be. Or maybe I'll have other precious things to care for. Either way, it's good for both of us to know how to take care of it." The autumn deepened, bringing shorter days and longer nights. The orphanage prepared for another winter, though this time with slightly better resources thanks to the community network Mrs. Vanderburg had built. The children helped preserve vegetables from the garden, carefully rationed supplies, and supported one another through the increasingly difficult conditions. Emma celebrated her 12th birthday in October, though the celebration was modest. A small piece of bread with a thin layer of jam, and the other children singing for her while she played her music box. It was enough. She had learned that joy didn't require abundance, only presence and connection. That evening, Mrs. Vanderburg pulled Emma aside. "You've become quite remarkable, you know. When you arrived here, I worried you might never recover from losing your parents. But you found a way to not just survive, but to help others survive as well." Emma felt uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," the matron said firmly. "Not everyone responds to hardship by becoming more compassionate. Some people become bitter or withdrawn. You've chosen a different path, and that choice matters." Later that night, lying in her narrow bed, Emma wound her music box one final time. She chose the broken setting, letting the familiar clicks surround her. She thought about her father, about the orphanage, about Thomas and Peter and all the other children who had become her unexpected family. She thought about Sergeant Hoffman, wherever he was now, and hoped he had made it home to his daughter. She thought about Mr. Jansen's patient hands repairing what seemed irreparable. The world was still at war. Food was still scarce. The future remained uncertain. But Emma had discovered something essential, that even in the darkest times, even when everything seems broken beyond repair, there are still moments of grace, still possibilities for connection, still reasons to wind up a music box and believe that its song, broken or whole, matters to someone. As 1944 progressed, rumors began circulating about Allied advances, about the possibility of liberation. People spoke in whispers of hope, afraid to believe too strongly, but unable to completely suppress their longing for freedom. At the orphanage, the children sensed the adults' cautious optimism and allowed themselves to imagine a different future. Emma continued her careful ritual with the music box, now understanding that her small actions existed within a larger world of invisible connections. She had learned that a broken toy could confuse trained soldiers, that an anonymous gift could sustain many, that one person's kindness could ripple outward in unexpected ways. In November, the weather turned bitter cold, colder than any winter Emma could remember. The canal outside the orphanage froze solid, and children from the neighborhood skated on its surface during the brief hours of daylight. Mrs. Vanderburg allowed the orphanage children to join them, believing that moments of joy were as essential as food and shelter for survival. Emma helped Thomas learn to skate, holding his small mittened hands as he wobbled across the ice. The other children laughed and played, their voices carrying across the frozen water like music. For those precious hours, the war seemed distant, almost unreal. They were simply children doing what children should do, playing, laughing, being young. But the cold also brought new hardships. Fuel for heating became almost impossible to obtain. At night, the children huddled together for warmth, sharing blankets and body heat. Mrs. Vanderberg moved all the beds into the common room, reasoning that one shared space would be warmer than multiple separate rooms. The children adapted, finding comfort in proximity, in the sound of each other's breathing during the long, dark nights. Emma kept her music box close during these nights, sometimes winding it quietly to provide a familiar sound that helped the younger children fall asleep. She alternated between the proper melody and the broken clicking, depending on what seemed needed. The lullaby her father had created worked beautifully for calming anxious minds, while the clicking provided a steady rhythm that some children found soothing. One particularly cold night in late November, Mrs. Vanderberg gathered all the children together. She had news, though her expression suggested it wasn't entirely good news. I want to be honest with you all. This winter will be very difficult. Food supplies are lower than ever before. We will be hungry. We will be cold. But we will face it together, and we will survive it together. How long will it last? Peter asked, his voice small in the dim room. I don't know, but I know this. We've made it this far, and that means we're strong enough to make it further. Each of you has already survived things that would break many adults. You are tougher than you know. Emma looked around at the faces of her fellow orphans. Some were crying quietly, others looked determined. Thomas had buried his face against her shoulder. She wound her music box and let the lullaby play, and slowly the tension in the room eased just slightly. December brought the hungriest days Emma had experienced. Meals became smaller and less frequent. The vegetable garden lay frozen and barren. The community network that had sustained them struggled as everyone's resources dwindled. Mrs. Vanderberg did everything she could, trading what little the orphanage had, appealing to anyone who might help, but it was never quite enough. Emma noticed how thin Thomas had become, how his eyes seemed too large for his face. She began giving him portions of her own meals, pretending she wasn't hungry or that she'd already eaten. Mrs. Vanderberg noticed but said nothing, recognizing that Emma needed to care for Thomas as much as Thomas needed the extra food. The children developed new strategies for managing hunger. They drank water to fill their stomachs. They stayed in bed longer to conserve energy. They told stories to distract themselves from the gnawing emptiness. Emma's music box became even more important during this time, providing something other than hunger to focus on. One evening, as Emma played the lullaby for the younger children, Mrs. Vanderberg sat beside her. Your father would be very proud of who you've become. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. I hope so. Sometimes I worry I'm forgetting him, forgetting what he looked like, how his voice sounded. The music box is his voice. Every time you wind it, you're hearing him tell you that he loved you, that he wanted you to have comfort and beauty in your life. That message doesn't fade, even when other memories do. Emma nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She wound the music box again, listening to the melody with new ears, hearing her father's love in every note. Christmas arrived with little fanfare. There were no gifts, no special foods, no decorations. But Mrs. Vanderberg led the children in singing carols, and someone donated a few candles that provided warm light, if not warmth. Emma played her music box, and Thomas, despite his weakness from hunger, smiled at the sound. In the darkest moment of winter, a small miracle occurred. A group of women from the neighborhood, organized by Mrs. Jansen, arrived at the orphanage with a modest collection of food they had somehow gathered. Bread, a few potatoes, some preserved vegetables, even a small portion of cheese. It wasn't much, but it was enough to ease the worst of the hunger for several days. Mrs. Vanderberg wept openly, overwhelmed by the kindness. The women hugged her, hugged the children, and left quickly before emotion overcame them all. Emma caught Mrs. Jansen's eye and mouthed, "Thank you," thinking of how the music box had connected her to this kind woman and her husband. As the old year ended and a new one began, Emma reflected on everything that had changed. She was 12 now, nearly 13, no longer the frightened 10-year-old who had arrived at the orphanage clutching a broken music box. She had learned so much about survival, about community, about finding strength in unexpected places. January 1945 brought no immediate relief, but there was something different in the air. The rumors of Allied advances had grown more concrete. People spoke with greater certainty about liberation coming, though no one knew exactly when. At the orphanage, Mrs. Vanderberg encouraged cautious hope, while reminding everyone to stay grounded in the present moment. Emma had begun teaching several of the children basic woodworking skills, using whatever scraps of wood she could find. She remembered her father's lessons, his patient hands guiding hers, his gentle voice explaining how to read the grain, how to let the wood tell you what it wanted to become. Now she passed that knowledge forward, helping younger children create simple objects, small toys, rough spoons, simple boxes. Thomas showed particular aptitude for the work. His small hands were surprisingly steady, and he had an intuitive understanding of how pieces fit together. Emma worked with him for hours, teaching him everything she remembered, pleased to see him find something he was good at, something that brought him pride and purpose. Your father would be happy to see this, Mrs. Vanderberg told Emma one afternoon, watching her work with the children. You're keeping his legacy alive in more ways than one. Emma smiled. The music box gave me something to hold on to. Now I want to give these children something to hold on to, too, even if it's just knowing how to make something useful from a piece of scrap wood. As winter slowly released its grip and February arrived, the orphanage had survived its darkest season. Not without loss and struggle, but they had survived. The children were thinner, more worn, but also somehow stronger, bound together by shared hardship and mutual care. By the time autumn arrived again, Emma was 11 years old. She had spent nearly 3 years in the orphanage, 3 years of learning to survive, to hope, to hold on to what mattered. Her music box remained her constant companion, its broken clicking now a sound she associated not with loss, but with resilience. The war's end would eventually come, though Emma didn't know when. What she did know was that she had survived something enormous, that she had held onto herself through the darkness, and that somehow her father's gift had helped her do it. The music box had given her comfort, yes, but it had also taught her an unexpected lesson about how small things can matter in ways we never imagine. Years later, when Emma was grown and had children of her own, she would tell them the story of how her broken music box confused the army for 6 hours. She would tell them about Mrs. Vonderberg's kindness, about Peter's friendship, and about the anonymous gift that appeared when it was most needed. She would tell them about learning that, even in the darkest times, even when you feel broken yourself, you still have the power to affect the world around you in unexpected ways. But all of that was still to come. For now, in the autumn of 1944, Emma was simply a girl sitting by a window, winding a music box, and believing that somehow everything would eventually be okay. The irregular clicking filled the small room, a sound that once caused confusion and concern, but now simply marked the passage of time, proof that both Emma and her father's creation had endured. Outside, the Amsterdam sky remained gray, but the heaviness had lifted slightly. The canal reflected fragments of late afternoon light. And in the orphanage, 23 children prepared for evening meal, their voices creating a different kind of music, the sound of young lives refusing to be silenced by the world's darkness. Emma closed the music box and placed it carefully in her pocket. Tomorrow she would wind it again, and the day after that. Not because she needed to confuse anyone's radios, but because it connected her to who she was, to where she came from, and to the hope that broken things could still serve a purpose, still tell a story, still matter, in ways both small and profound.